everyone. I have the pleasure in the last couple of weeks to help out with the Chicago Navigators. My friend D.G. Elmore, and who is the chairman of the board of Navigators, introduced me to this wonderful ministry called Navigators. And through that, I've gotten to meet a lot of different people. Two people I really want to introduce to you today is Dr. Mica Battle and Dr. Ahmed Joktan. Now, Ahmed, how do you pronounce your last name?
It's Joktan. You're right.
Yeah, so Dr. Ahmed Joktan. And so the thing I actually want you to hear is journey and how God teaches us through even some of the tougher times in our life, and how do you help process through some of the tough times in our life. And so I actually want to be able to profile and share with you guys two of those stories as well too. Mica, I would love for you to share a little bit, first of all, what you do with your ministry, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself.
So what I do is I house men and women who come home from prison, and the name of the ministry is called Bridge to Freedom. So these men and women, we meet them, it's sort of like a job fair. You meet them behind bars when the different prisons, the 28 prisons in the state of Illinois, invite people who have resources, and you go in and you meet them, and they fill out applications, and we see if they're a fit for our program. And so we work with them 1 year while they're behind the bars, and then 2 years, they're able to stay at our facility for 2 years, getting themselves together, going to school, getting a job, dealing with anger management, lifestyle redirection, and different things like that once they come home from prison. And these are generally people who don't have a lot of family involvement. Like one of our people that's there, their green card expired while they were in prison. And so they're undocumented, and they're at Bridge to Freedom. And so we have all kind of people, minorities, whites, because that's one thing about the enemy. He's not discriminatory. And so he's able to get his hands in on all people.
You got it. And Mica, your journey, talk a little bit about your life and some of the struggles and trials that you've actually had to deal with your life.
Right. So I'm an ex-offender myself. I came home from prison in 2002. Prior to that, I came from a white-collar family. My parents were both white-collar workers. My mother was an educator. My father was co-administrator of Continental Bank. He was the first African-American to have a white-collar job in that bank outside of being a janitor or, a teller or something like that. But at any rate, he struggled with drugs himself. And we later found that out, later on in life. But I started using drugs at a very early age. Probably, I'm writing a book right now, so I'm really starting to remember a lot of stuff. I probably started using drugs at age 12. And the reason being is because I was considered very, very smart. So they doubled me in school, right? They pushed me up. And so I started high school at 12.
Wow.
So I was actually academically ready, but I wasn't emotionally or mentally ready. So I got introduced to a group of, my peers were drinking and smoking weed and popping pills and different things like that. So to feel inclusive, I started using drugs with them. Plus, I was going through a lot of pain. My parents had divorced. I had been raped at 3 years old. So I had a lot of inner struggles that I was going with, and I was medicating these traumas that had occurred in my life. And so my first introduction to heroin, I probably was like about 13 or 14 years old. And I was going to Kenwood High School, which is a very diverse high school here in the city of Chicago and Hyde Park. And I was introduced to heroin and cough syrup with codeine probably at 14 years old. And I just began, I wouldn't even use. I hear people say experimenting with drugs. It wasn't an experiment in my life. I just began to use them, and I also began to sell them. And
Mm.
after years and years of drug use, and even during my pregnancies with my children, I've apologized. All three of my children are married. I've apologized to all of their spouses and to my grandchildren because I told them your parents were born high, right? Because when I had children, they weren't testing the parents to see if there was drugs in their system. So there was drugs in all of my children's system. I mean, I'm almost absolutely sure. And so, but at any rate, after years and years of this drug use and just more traumas, because when you're using drugs like that, you're just going to have trauma after trauma after trauma. And I married into a big, like a drug cartel, an African American drug cartel family here in the city of Chicago. And I married into that family. But after years of drug use and my husband being murdered and just living that lifestyle, that high profile lifestyle, I would call it like diamonds, furs, minks, but unemployed, right? You know, just money and cars and houses and, you know, just all of this stuff. And after years and years of that, I ended up going to the penitentiary myself. And that was just, you know, somebody would say, oh, well, God, that's one of the worst things that ever happened. But for me, it was one of the best things that ever happened because that's where I actually got saved. That's where I actually began to heal, understand some of the things that had happened to me, even the rape at 3 years old. I didn't remember that until I was 40 years old. I was in a psychology class in prison because I went to school while I was in prison. And prison opened up my just appetite for learning because, like I told you, in grammar school and in grammar school, by the time I got to high school, I had already had an appetite for drugs, and that ceased that learning that I was doing and all of that academia. But in grammar school, I was very smart, and so when I began to take classes in prison, it opened up my mind for learning again. And so God even restored my mind, and he even just the fact that he kept my mind all those years, because I overdosed off of heroin probably like about 4 times. I'm talking straight flat line. And so it was just amazing. But at any rate, just being saved there in prison, my walk with God, when I came home, it just intensified. Like I said, I came home in 2002, and my walk with God, it hasn't done anything but gotten better and better and better and better and greater and greater and greater and greater. And so when I came home, I started school like about 4 years after I'd been home. And I went to school 13 years. And the first thing I got was an associate in criminal justice, then a bachelor's in criminal justice, a master's in criminal justice. And I went on to get a doctorate in organizational management and leadership. And so right now I do a lot of leadership development, even within the NAVs, even within Bridge to Freedom. My dissertation was on African American ex-offenders who successfully reintegrate back into society and become entrepreneurs. It was a phenomenological study. Part of the study was, you know, based on my life. I came home and became an entrepreneur. I had already been a hustler in the streets, being in that family, you know, and we were selling drugs. That's nothing but a business.
Mm.
That's nothing but a business. As a matter of fact, being a criminal, you are a businessman. You are an entrepreneur. Even if you aren't doing anything but being an addict and you have to support your habit daily, you're an entrepreneur. I mean, if you're going to shoot $200-300 worth of dope a day, it takes some real serious business to be able to make that kind of money. And so that's what came out of the study, that criminals are businessmen. They're just selling the wrong product or whatever. And so right now, I'm the executive director of Bridge to Freedom. I consult with a lot of companies and a lot of businesses and a lot of individuals. And just work in my city and in my community, as an activist, as somebody that networks and brings other organizations together. And I advocate on behalf of men and women who come from prison, women who've been victims of domestic violence, and women who've been victims of rape, even men who've been victims of rape, because that's something that we don't talk about a lot. And it's something that men don't talk about a lot. Women just go, wah, 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 wah. We don't have a problem talking about sexual abuse, but our men hide it. And so,
Got it.
Yeah, that's about what I do, Tommy.
Got it. Thank you so much, Mica. Hey, Ahmed, let me ask you, you work and serve within the area of NAV's Nations Within. Talk a little bit about the ministry, but also talk a little bit about your own journey as well, too, because you've dealt with your own issues of hardship and struggle.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. And I'm sorry to hear about what he went through, Dr. Mica. We have a common place that went through as well, called jail. Mm-hmm. I was jailed because of my faith in Jesus. Mm-hmm. So, my name is Ahmed Joktan, and I'm from Mica, Saudi Arabia. So I'm not from the United States at all. And I serve now part-time with the Navigators Nations Within. And the Nations Within primarily, working with immigrants who, came to the United States. They're not originally from here. And they have not heard the gospel. So we want to develop personal relationship with them and with those community in order to bring them to Jesus. So that's what we do here in Chicago. And by the grace of God, we started 2 underground fellowship house churches here among the Muslim community here and the Hindu community as well. Now, my personal journey is totally different. So, as I told you, I grew up in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. I am Saudi Arabian in citizenship. And my father is an Islamic mufti. And mufti is a person who's a jurist. Basically, if you look at the Catholic belief system and hierarchy, you have the Pope. In Islam, in the Sunni Islam, you have the Grand Mufti. And then you have the cardinals. So my father was a cardinal in Mecca. Mecca is the homeland of Islam. Muslims, we have like 2 billion Muslims around the world today. When they pray 5 times a day, 3 to 5 times a day, they bow down toward Mecca, Saudi Arabia. So I grew up in, such extreme religious, Islamic religious teaching. And by the age of 13, I memorized the entire Quran with no mistake. And at the time of graduation from high school, I decided I want to pursue the study of medicine. However, medicine in Saudi is taught in English. So growing up, they did not teach us English because English is the language of infidelity. So no English at all. So imagine me getting into school and, looking at the screen, and medicine is taught in English. And here I am facing a language that I don't understand. And coming from Eastern background, we carry a big load of shame and honor. So if I fail, I would shame my father and my family. And my father is well known; he goes on TV and stuff. So I decided to, go to New Zealand to study English, and I went there. And a few months in my stay there, I had a dream. And the cause of that dream was actually the Lord prompted a pastor in the Auckland Baptist Tabernacle of New Zealand to pray that the Lord will bring them someone from Saudi Arabia. He told me personally that he was praying that, Lord, you have sent us Muslims from Iran, Iraq, other nations, but no one from Saudi. Would you send someone from Saudi Arabia? And, at the night I had this dream, and the Lord took me on a journey where I went to that tabernacle. And the first question the man asked me is, tell me about your dream. So it was shocking for me. But he told me later on that he was expecting me to come because he prayed in faith. After that, I went back to Saudi Arabia, and persecution began. In Saudi Arabia, we have no churches, zero. And if you become a Christian, then it's a capital crime punished by death, by beheading. And Saudi Arabia is one of the countries that always comes up with UN human rights and stuff for executions. Every year, in fact, every Friday they kill someone. So, I've been to prison because I share the gospel. 13 of my front teeth being knocked down when the religious police came and arrested me because I shared my faith publicly. And in 2017, while I was working as a medical doctor, which I lost everything because of my faith in Jesus, I've been hunted down, being shot at, bullets showered my car, and I had to run from country to country, being hunted by the intelligence, being hunted by the governments, until I came here to the United States, and I asked for protection. And even here, I had some hardship, and the Lord provided in an unexpected way. Who thought that one day I would receive letters from senators and congressmen and women standing on my side for such injustice? So yeah, it's a long journey. I have a book called From Mecca to Christ. It's on Amazon, and in there I detailed much more of such journey.
Got it. Well, Dr. Mica and Dr. Ahmed, or Mica Ahmed, the reason why I brought you on is to share with the audience a little bit about some of the trials that you guys have faced, but also talk a little bit about journey. All of you guys, and you two are meeting each other for the very first time, but you guys are serving together but in different groups. And it is interesting how God uses our journey to really shape us and allow us to really be able to see him a little bit. As you look back, and I'm going to go with you, Mica, as you look back now, what are some of the, how did that experience shape you into the person that you are today? What were some of the lessons that you gleaned that really made you to the person you are today?
Well, there's no way that I could do the job that I do with men and women who come home from prison to the extent that I do it if I had not had been in prison myself, right? So I will say that my life was anointed from the beginning for struggle. My last name is Battle, and it's like I've been fighting all of my life. And I was just anointed for the struggles that I was going to go through. Heroin overdose, being raped, going to prison, being a single mother, all of those things. I'm able to I don't just have a theoretical framework to help people with. I have an experiential framework. And that is very classic in businesses and in the hiring processes. The hiring process is used to contain where they just wanted you to have this degree or that degree.
Yeah.
Well, now they'll say, we want you to have this degree and 5 years experience, or that degree and 5 years experience. So not only do I have the academic or the theoretical framework that is needed to do my job efficiently, I also have the experiential framework to be able to do my job the way that I do it. And so I believe that the experience that God allowed me to go through, I think it was similar to Job in the instruction part. I believe the Lord told the enemy not to her death. And so God allowed me to go through all of these extremes of traumas and trials and tribulations. But his hand was on me from the beginning. and he anointed me to be, most people would have lost their mind going through some of the stuff that I've been through. But yes.
Got it. Thank you. Ahmed, let me go through you right now. Is you look back, and it's now been a couple of years, and that you had to go through all those things. How did that experience shape you into the person you are today? I'm sure it developed resiliency within you. What other? And probably you struggled with anger during that time. Well, how has it shaped you into the person you are today?
Yeah. At the beginning, I was like, Jesus, why are you doing this to me? I thought you loved me. John 3:16, for God loved you. Do you love me, God? But now, 10 years later, I look back and I'm like, thank you, Jesus, for making me go through those persecution, troubles, and trials to know who you are. Without all those things, terrible, being shot at, being beaten down, being imprisoned, being hunted from country to country. But then I look back and I'm like, wow, now I can see God's promises coming true. Who thought that I would walk in a place where I know nobody, in a country that I've never been to before, and people will tell me, this is your house, we are your family. I mean, I've been disowned from my family because of my faith. And here I am in a new country, and people that I don't know them, they're welcoming me as part of their family. Jesus said, whoever lost father, mother, brother, sister, or property for my sake and for the sake of the gospel, you should receive now 100-fold. And those gospel promises, you cannot see them if you just live in a comfortable life. But if you are persecuted, you are blessed. And this is what I say always. That's why I take pleasure in weakness, in the insults, hardship, persecution, troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I'm weak, then I'm strong. And God's power revealed the best is when we when we lift off our hands from taking control over the situation. When there is no way that we can do anything, when we are hopeless and we see God working, God breaking through, that is, this is what I believe, that is the most powerful thing to see through those trials, God's hand moving over. So my journey is saying, at the beginning, I was angry, I was mad at God. I'm like, do you even love me? And now I'm like, every day I wake up, I'm like, thank you, Jesus, for letting me go through all those trials to know who you are and to be closer to you.
Hey, Ahmed, and this is just me asking a naive question. Do you talk to your family anymore, or are you able to leave the U.S., or what's the situation with yourself right now?
It's really a sad thing, but in Islam, it's not all Islam, but in the extreme part of Islam, they believe that they should have no tenderness or any love toward those who become infidels and forsaking Islam, because they came from an extreme, strain of Islam called Wahhabism. And my family legacy was to fight for Islam, and they look at me as a deserted person. And on top of that, I came from a shame and honor culture. It's not innocent and guilt. So because I have ashamed them, I have forsaken that legacy for Jesus. Therefore, I'm dead to them. So no, I have not talked to my family for over 10 years now.
Got it.
And it's really a sad thing, and I pray for them every day. I pray that the Lord will reveal Himself to them. I know God is able, if that is His will. But no, till now, there's no contact.
Got it. Hey, Mica, one thing I did want to ask for your organization, and eventually I'm going to spend some more time talking with each one of you guys. How are the people dealing that you work with in your organization dealing in the midst of this pandemic? How are they holding up? How are you guys serving and coming alongside with them?
So I jokingly say that now the whole world understands what it is to be locked down, like we were in prison or whatever. We did this kind of time in prison, right? We Some prisons we're locked down 23-1, where we're in our cells 23 and we're able to come out for 1 hour for a shower or for a yard or something like that. Now the whole world kind of understands what it is to be locked down. So mentally, they are dealing with this probably better than normal people would, because they're used to being locked down. They all come from prison. But then you have some, like today, I told you that I had to go do a face-to-face over at Bridge to Freedom because I had to put one of them out, right? He works. So we are on quarantine, lockdown. That means nobody goes anywhere, nobody does anything. We take store visits or something like that. And one of our residential assistants had to be put in the hospital because she had a bowel blockage. And so with her out of the house, that kind of lost some of our staff, because 2 of our staff actually live at Bridge. They live there. And so they're quarantined in with them. So one of the guys that worked, well, when he got paid on Friday, he just decided that he was going to start using again. So it quickly, through the grapevine, ran through the house. He's running out in the middle of the night, and we're having to open the door to let him back in and all this. So I think you remember the scripture where the centurion told Jesus, he said, look, I think his daughter was sick, or his son, his servant was sick in his house, and Jesus was on his way there. And he stopped Jesus. He said, you know what? You don't have to come. You got power and authority. You can call this sickness out of my house from right where you are. So from right where I was at home, I put him out. I called Bridge and told them, don't let him back in, because he broke the quarantine and he left. He was only supposed to go to work. But overall, they're doing well. I went over there today. Everybody was doing well. Another one of our staff members, we called him Big Heavy. He came in to help me just in case there were any issues, because we packed this guy's stuff, all of his stuff, and it's at the door because we don't even want him back in the building. He said he would be there today to get his stuff. But overall, they're doing well. And as a matter of fact, Big Heavy told them today, he said, y'all can do this standing on your head. You're used to being locked down. And they are. I'm not having a lot of issues with being in the house, because when you've been in prison, and I'm sure the doctor would be able to tell you as well, this is what happened. We're not able to go anywhere. You know, you're locked down. So basically they're doing okay.
Good.
They're doing okay. I'm sure it's some fear, but they're doing okay.
For those who are part of the Chicago Navs network, and we'll share this with the Chicago Navs family, these are the people that are leading your ministry in Chicago. These are the people who are doing, whether it's Dr. Mica Battle, Dr. Ahmed Joktan, whether it's with ex-offenders, whether it's with church planting for the Muslim community. These are the people who are making a difference for the gospel in their city. And in the days ahead, as we continue to work and share these stories and what they're doing with the Navs community, we hope that they will be supportive of everything that you all are doing. So thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable about your journey. And I'm glad both of you guys had a chance to meet each other and also realize some of the things that you guys had, even though you guys were in 2 different parts of the world, that it is your journey and your struggles that binds all of us together. So Dr. Battle, Dr. Joktan, thank you very much for being on this call.
Tommy, thank you for having us.
Tommy, thank you. And let me say to the doctor that, guess what? You make my time in prison for you to have served time in prison for something that you did good, that's scriptural. And so I just would say, be encouraged, be encouraged. I didn't go to prison for doing anything good. I was terrible. And so, I just think it's so honorable that you went to prison because you wanted to be saved, sanctified, filled with the Holy Ghost, and spread the gospel. That's such an honorable thing.
Thank you. And I'm so glad and happy to labor alongside with you and the Navigators.
I'm so glad to labor alongside of you as well.
Take care. We will have more stories, and we're going to follow both of their journeys in their ministries in the days ahead. So for more information, go to chicagonavs.org for more information on the Chicago Navigators. That is chicagonavs.org. Thank you very much. We'll talk soon, all right?
Okay, bye-bye.